Terminator 2 Judgment Day is a bad sequel. Yeah, you heard me. T2, the iconic movie from 1991, is a bad sequel. But how is that possible? Is it because it's one of the few movies by James Cameron that doesn't get an absolutely amazing contribution from Bill Paxton? Because seriously, those two must have been close buds. But no, that's not why. Is it because it's one of James Cameron's early dips into his obsession with water-themed movies, having a liquid metal robot? Nope. That's not why either. It's not even because of the things that absolutely make no sense, other than to set something up for a bigger action moment, because you know the T-1000 had no reason to drive a motorcycle up the stairs other than it looked cool for him to crash out a window, despite the fact that we see him run super fast before. In fact, he originally ran so fast chasing John Connor on his motorbike that he would actually catch him, so they had to make him slow down a bit. You see, the thing is, I was very specific with my wording. Terminator 2 is actually an awesome movie. I grew up on it, probably watching it at a way younger age than I should have, and I absolutely adore it to this day. That being said, it's still a bad sequel. And James Cameron knows how to do sequels. I mean, he mastered the art of it with Aliens, and he's making a bunch of Avatar movies despite the fact that he's following the same pattern as Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is slightly frustrating to a fan of that series. I mean, hell, even in the earliest parts of his career, he had a hand in Piranha 2 and Rambo First Blood Part 2. But the thing about sequels is that in order to be a faithful sequel, you should follow the same rules. Highlighted ever so eloquently in a monologue from Jamie Kennedy in Scream 3, even though in Scream 2 they directly praised James Cameron sequels like Aliens and T2, claiming they're apparently better than the originals.
Aliens, far better than the first.
T2.
You've got a hard on for Cameron.
But in Scream 3, he points out that the same rules of the original need to apply to at least the first sequel, even if they go totally off the rails once you hit a trilogy. Anyway, Terminator 2 breaks the rules of the original because of the main plot device of the movie. You see, there's three main types of time travel in movies. The alternate universe time travel, where every time you go back in time, something is changed. It then creates or already was an alternate timeline. This is simply to avoid the butterfly effect and the time traveler's paradox, where changing something will change your present, and if it's something you're fixing in the past, then going back to the past to fix it will then change your future, which means you wouldn't have a reason to go to the past in the first place. So therefore you wouldn't have gone back, meaning that it becomes an endless loop of, well, did you go back to fix it or didn't you? Because now we're stuck. Or maybe you just have the alternate timeline time travel theory because you don't want to destroy the entire canon of the world you've created. The most recently very apparent version of this is in the Marvel universe, despite the fact that they even screwed it up in the very first movie they introduced it. Like, seriously, how does Cap wind up back in the same place if he was supposed to have gone to an alternate timeline, but he never uses the device to come back? He would have had to meet new people to invent it, go to a different place, and then sneak up on them as old Cap. But I digress. Then there's the second type of time travel, and this is the category the original Terminator falls into, when time travel is more like destiny. There's something that has to happen as a result of the time travel in order for the future that someone was sent back from to originally exist. This doesn't happen as often in movies because it raises some weird questions sometimes. Like in Terminator, Arnold is a robot sent back to kill John Connor's mom before she can even have John, who becomes a leader of the human resistance against the robots in the distant future. But simultaneously, John Connor sends back Kyle Reese, a human, to help protect his mom. However, that kind of becomes predestined because Kyle Reese bangs Sarah Connor, knocking her up and creating John Connor in the first place. He also teaches her a bunch of stuff that she later teaches John before he gets himself killed while they're trying to destroy Robo Arnold. And it's even referenced that a lot of the advancements in robotics actually come from the pieces of Robo Arnold that are left after his destruction. So everything in this time travel needs to happen in order for the known future to occur, which raises a lot of questions because it seems like John Connor would have known his father is Kyle Reese, but Kyle Reese didn't know that he's John's dad. So was John just hoping for the best? Did he know time travel was predestined? Or is he not so subtly hinting to Kyle that he should bang his mom before he's sent back in time? Was he like, seriously, dude, my mom's an absolute smoke show? Or getting really weird with it, saying like, if she wasn't my mom, I'd be like, damn girl, you fine. Which makes me feel gross, even saying out loud, and I apologize to my own mom in case that ever gets taken out of context. But the big problem is that Terminator 2 doesn't use this same time travel idea. It uses the third type of time travel. And this is where going back to the past changes the future, no matter how dangerous of a concept it is. This is most famously done in the original Back to the Future, where if Marty winds up accidentally almost banging his own mom in the past, he uncreates himself and his whole family. That's already too many mom banging references in this video, but granted, they also did the alternate timeline time travel in Back to the Future 2, which is also a sequel, when Biff basically becomes Trump. But I'll give that one a pass because at least it's going to the future when the original was going to the past. So different rules is semi-allowed since it's a semi-different concept of time travel. However, Terminator 2 falls under this third form of time travel, but it does it in a way that obviously triggers the time traveler's paradox. Because in Terminator 2, Arnold is sent back to protect John Connor, the future leader of the human resistance, against the robot uprising, and he's sent to protect him against the T-1000, a much more advanced murder robot that can turn into liquid metal, shapeshift, and have sword arms. Which, by the way, must have seemed like an absolutely massive twist for people who saw it in theaters, because everyone went in thinking, holy shit, the original had one robot bad guy, but this one has two robot bad guys. And then suddenly one of them turns out to be a protector, which is now a commonly known thing. But back then it must have been like, oh my God. Now, this, at its core, wouldn't break the rules of the first movie. This could happen an endless amount of times and even lead to moments where in future sequels, the Connors would become increasingly paranoid about someone being an actual robot and not knowing the truth, which is probably part of why Sarah Connor is in an insane asylum at the beginning of Terminator 2. But that could have plenty of interesting dynamics and stories for future sequels that wouldn't break its own rules of time travel. But this movie wanted another plot point. So beyond just saving John and destroying the T-1000, there's another plot about preventing Judgment Day in the first place, which is the day that AI known as Skynet becomes self-aware and nukes everyone in the world. So they break into the lead scientist's house that's been researching the microchip from the first movie, then proceed to scare the shit out of him in a way I should not have been seeing at the young age that I was watching this movie for the first time. Once he's scared enough, he agrees to help them blow up his lab to stop Judgment Day, because wiping out all the research and tech relating to the future will apparently stop Judgment Day from happening, which is somewhat of its own paradox, because that means that there's no original idea that ever happens for the tech that makes Skynet in the first place. It's all one big circle because the tech comes from the future and that creates the tech in the future. So nobody comes up with the idea in the first place, which, whatever, that's beside the point. Dyson winds up blowing himself up with his lab, and then the main crew takes on the T-1000 by freezing him, blowing him up, and then melting him in liquid hot magma.
With liquid hot magma.
Since everyone needs to be destroyed to stop Judgment Day, despite the breaking of the rules, we're then forced to have one of the saddest scenes in cinematic history as we start bawling our eyes out for losing an emotionless Austrian death machine. Weird band name, by the way. The movie comes to an end with a voiceover from Linda Hamilton, who plays Sarah Connor, talking about the unknowns of the future, which would mean this whole video doesn't matter, right? Because it leaves everything vague, which is cool, right? And that means it doesn't technically break the rules. But the thing is, it wasn't originally going to be that way. There's a few very big scenes that get cut from the original Terminator 2, but there are two especially notable ones. The first is the T-1000 glitching out after being frozen because apparently that messed with his system, and then his camouflage shape-shifting malfunctions. So randomly he starts to semi-look like things that he's touching. This becomes really important because he tries to look like Sarah Connor, and in this version of the deleted scenes, her hand starts to look like the railing that she's holding onto, giving away that it's secretly the T-1000. This gets changed and completely removed, even though I thought it was kind of a cool detail. I think the idea of removing this portion is to encourage us to believe that the relationship between John and Sarah has grown and they know each other well enough to start seeing through the disguises a little bit. But we haven't really been given a ton of scenes to reinforce this idea, so I kind of wish they stuck with the deleted version. But more importantly, pertaining to this video, there's the alternate ending from the director's cut. This ending seems to be what was originally intended, as way more effort went into this ending than the ending we saw in the theatrical version. We cut to Sarah Connor sitting on a bench in a park, speaking into a voice recorder, which does actually explain why there is her voice throughout the segments of the movie, because she was reciting things that happened in the past into this recorder. Then we're shown this is very much the future, as she is much, much older and actually a grandmother to John's children. Not only that, but John isn't the leader of the resistance anymore. He becomes a senator pushing for the good of everybody, meaning that blowing up the lab did stop Judgment Day. But that starts running into the time traveler's paradox, because if there's no Judgment Day, then John doesn't have a reason to send Kyle Reese back to bang his mom. And if that doesn't happen, John isn't born. Unless this somehow takes a turn and creates an alternate timeline, which again falls into a different category of time travel, because then the only reason that Kyle Reese would be sent back to protect Sarah Connor is that he would be protecting an alternate version of Sarah Connor that in no way affects the people who sent him back in the first place, because that's a different timeline if that's what they're trying to theorize, leading to a whole bunch of wibbly wobbly timey stuff, as the doctor may say. So is Terminator 2 a bad movie? No, it has a couple of faults here and there, and it's slightly strange that this movie was so heavily marketed to young children, but it is an amazing action movie that is peak 90s Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it should be treasured despite the fact that later additions to the franchise didn't quite live up to that quality. However, despite all that, I would still consider it a bad sequel for breaking the rules of the original. If you're going to do that, at least wait till Terminator 3. But that's just my opinion. I think way too long and hard about this stuff, and you could have totally different opinions than me about it. Subscribe for more random videos, Reddit stories, and whatever else I wind up making videos about if that's your thing. And hey, if you're subscribed, you can at least honestly say,
I'll be back.